I am Nikki Hibbets. I am the creator of The Ruffled Purse, which you can find at theruffledpurse.com, and there it is my goal to support and empower and inspire others to discover the joy of sewing. In the video today, I'm going to be basically showing you how you can DIY your own cushion covers for outdoor furniture. Now, this video is based on the fact that you already own the furniture that you want to recover. So this could be furniture that you've had for a while and the cushion covers are just old and worn, or maybe it's something that you've acquired from an estate sale or a garage sale or a family member, and the cushions are in pretty good shape, or the covers are, but you just want a different type of fabric. So regardless of the reason of why you're recovering the cushions, the idea is that you can. If you've got sewing skills, then you can recover cushion covers on outdoor furniture. If I had thought ahead of time before I actually started the project, I would have shown you what the old covers look like before I pulled them off and how the steps would be from beginning to end. But I didn't think about videoing until I was actually halfway done with the project. So I have two chairs outside, two chair frames that have cushions on them, and I have recovered one set, and then through the video I'll show you how I recover the other set. I do have a detailed blog post that has some additional photos and lots of extra information so that you can use it in addition with this video to read more of the details on DIYing your own cushion covers. Now let me just kind of show you. We're going to be using the old cushion covers in order to create our new cushion covers. So this is actually the fabric, and I still have some of the fabric pieces because you don't want to get rid of those until you're completely done. They can be used as pattern pieces themselves, or they're used as a reference as you're getting everything put back together. So these cushion covers, and the reason I replaced them is they're very faded, and then cats had been sitting on them outside, just neighborhood cats, and I never cleaned them, so they just got filthy and disgusting. So I'm trying not to let them touch any of my other fabric or anything. But this is what the old cushion cover looked like, and so I use this throughout the process. I'll come back to that in just a second. But really what I want to show you is the first step, which would be measuring the cushions before you pull anything off. So it's kind of like the finished cushion and the measurements. Now I told you that I already did and created two of the covers. So this is the bottom cover. It's a boxed cushion. And so I've got this beautiful turquoise fabric with some contrasting bright orange welting that I made also. So imagine that this was covered in that other fabric. So if this was sitting outside, because it wouldn't be on my table, but if this was sitting outside, then I'm going to get rough measurements of every piece of fabric, and then I'm going to write them down because I need to have a record of what the measurements are on the finished box cushion. So when I talk about rough measurements, it's not necessarily measuring from here to here exactly. It's more of overlapping just a little bit. So when I look at the width of this cushion, it's just overhanging the edge of the cushion a little bit. I look over here, and this piece of fabric on the top is about 29 inches. So that's actually a little bit longer, about an inch longer than it looks like it really is. So about 29 inches. And then I would get the measurement this way, and going from just on the other side of the welting over here. This is actually, it's a little bit smaller, so it's about 27 inches. Now, when I would do that, and there's actually a close-up of this in the video. I don't know if you can, not the video, the blog post, but if you can kind of see it, I sketched the box cushion, and then I also sketched the top cushion, and then I've got the measurements of everything. So I've got the top cushion measurement, and then I also want to be measuring all of the fabric that is all the way around in that center part. The original cushion had a zipper on it, and I decided not to put a zipper in because I never pulled the cushions off before to wash them, and I probably won't do it on these either. So instead of messing with the zipper, I decided that I was just going to sew that closed. But when I look at it, there is a seam right here. So there's and there's another seam right here. So I want to get measurements of all of that fabric, and I want to sketch it on here where that looks. Now, the top cushion is not a box cushion. It's a little bit more free form. So it's got some curves on the side. It has some pleats on the side. On the bottom, it did have a zipper too, but instead also I decided to not put a zipper back in. I just wanted to close that. If I ever did want to pull these off and wash them, I can just clip my stitches, take it off, and put it back on and sew it closed again. If you can see the zigzag stitches, that's just holding the raw edge down. So if I was going to get raw measurements or rough measurements of this cushion, let me move this one out of the way. This fabric goes all the way from the welting on one side to the welting on the other side. So I'm going to just kind of hold it. Again, it's going to be rough. I'm not exactly sure what you can see in the video. So just kind of here, come around to this side, make it a little bit longer, and that one's about 35 inches. And then the same thing, I'm going to go from the welting over here, and there's actually a piece of fabric right here, so I'm going to go to the edge of the piece of fabric a little bit more, and that would be, say, for example, 26 inches. But all of that is recorded right here on the paper for me to come back to. Once I recorded all those measurements here, I added a couple inches to each side for seam allowances and error, and then I made a note of all of the pieces I would need up at the top. So that's kind of the beginning. Rough measurements, sketch it, write it down, and then also make sure that you take pictures. Take pictures of everything before you start pulling stuff apart, because there's a pretty good chance that you'll have to go back and reference those pictures. Now, the purpose of the measurements is so that you can figure out how much fabric that you're going to need to purchase. And one way that you can do that is by just taking your measurements that you've put up here at the top, so you know how many pieces you need and the measurements of each of those pieces, and then kind of sketch that out and in two different widths of fabric. So one of these, this one, I'm imagining that's 54 inches wide. The other one is 60 inches wide. So it's not to scale, it's not exact, but it does have the measurements, and I did some math on it to make sure that all of the pieces I need would fit on here. Because I wasn't sure what fabric I wanted, and I didn't know, would it be 54 inches wide? Would it be 60 inches wide? How much would I need? So we've measured our original cushions for rough measurements. We recorded those down. We took pictures. We transfer that to some rough sketches to get a layout of how much fabric we would need. You also need to think about, are you going to have any welting? So the welting is basically called piping with clothes, but it's the beautiful cord that goes around and provides a little bit of support and detail to your cushion covers. If your cushions already have welting, you could probably reuse that. And if not, you would just want to measure where that welting would go so you would know how much you need. You'd also have to determine how much fabric you would need for the welting. Welting, or the cording, the welting, is typically covered with fabric that's cut on the bias, and it's typically about 1.5 to 1 3/4 to 2 inches wide. So it really just depends on how wide the welting is. Now, if you're thinking, oh my gosh, Nikki, I'm never going to remember all of this stuff, I do have a blog post that has all of this in detail with some videos supporting it, so that you'll know exactly what to do for all of those steps. So once you figure out the fabric and all of that, you're ready to actually start creating your pattern pieces. So the pattern pieces, if you can at all, even if it's gross and disgusting fabric, use your seam ripper and pull the fabric apart, because then you'll get an idea of how the original cover was constructed. If it's not too filthy and dirty, you can actually use that same fabric to be your pattern. If there's any places like this one had some pleats in it, I would want to make note of those marks. So one thing that you could do is, once you pull it apart, because you'd have the seam allowances, you would have the markings on there, use the actual cover for your pattern piece. If it's just too gross and disgusting, then just use a piece of paper and trace it. Lay down the old cover on the paper and trace it. You would want to label what piece it is, how many you would need, which way the grain line is going on the original fabric, mark your seam allowance, and then you'd want to transfer any markings. Now, this paper was in a big roll that my mother had in her garage. It's almost like a drawing paper. Any large paper would work. You could even, if you wanted to, check your local packing departments and see if they sell rolls of paper. If you needed to, you could take some copy paper and kind of tape that together. But large paper is an option for making your own pattern pieces. Now, this was an example, was a mistake. I actually didn't remove everything off of my cutting table and actually cut that paper. I just made sure that it was together when I cut it from the fabric. So making the pattern pieces is the next thing that you would want to do. After that, you go into laying out the fabric, cutting out the pieces, and then the construction part. Two different parts to the construction. One would be creating the welting, if you're going to be making your own and having that on your cushions. And then the other one would actually be putting together all of the fabric pieces. So if you keep on watching the video, I'll go through some different things to show you some visuals on the different steps. Go to the blog post that is linked below this video, and you will be able to go to the detailed directions and instructions with even more videos to support you in sewing your own cushion covers. So I will see you in the next section of the video. So I'm going to be transferring the markings from my pattern on the top cushion cover to the fabric pieces below it. So I actually had folded this with right sides together, and I was able to cut out both pieces at once. So I'm going to mark these markings for the darts on the wrong side of both of those fabrics. Now, if you're noticing this over here, this was an accident. I accidentally cut part of that pattern piece, but when I cut it out, I did set those on there so that didn't affect anything. So normally you wouldn't have this here. I have already transferred the markings to one of the darts, and so I'm getting ready to show you how I do it with the others. I did on the back side, and you can barely see it. There's the point, and then here's the two markings here. I'll actually draw the lines on this one cushion cover underneath after I get all three markings on there. So I have basically used a pen, use a marking utensil, and then I have a ruler that I'm going to use. I'm going to stick the pen in the hole so that it goes through both fabrics. And then I'm going to take my marking pen, and I'm just going to kind of fold back the pattern, and then I'm going to make a circle right where the pen goes into the fabric. Then I'm going to just fold this back, and where it's coming through, I'm going to make another circle to make sure I can see it here in a little bit. Now, blue is the color of my pen, happens to be the color of my fabric. It is not the best color to use. It's harder to see in the video, but I can see it here. Then I'm going to set my pen off to the side, and then basically I'm just going to kind of lift this up and just make a little mark there and a little mark here at the top. Then to get on the other side, kind of move my arm around here. I'm looking at this right here, and then I'm just putting my fabric marker underneath it so I can mark it there. And then same thing, I'm just looking here, and then I'm marking. Now, this is a cushion cover. It's not like a piece of clothing where it has to be exact. I just need to get some marks that are pretty close, and those are pretty darn close. So then the next thing that I would do is I would take my ruler, I put it on one dot here, line it up over here, and then I just draw a straight line. Then same thing, there's my dot, rotate it over here, line it up there, and then make my line. So I'm going to go ahead and do the other one on this side. I'm going to mark the two that are on the far side, the other corner that you can't see. And then once I get all of those marked, I'll turn it over and mark the fabric, draw the lines on the fabric over here. So that is how I transfer marks from a pattern piece to the fabric. The next thing I'm going to do is show you what I do with the marks that were on the back. Now, when we marked the marks on the back, I had mentioned those as darts, but they actually weren't darts. When I looked at the old cushion, I realized that they were pleats instead of darts. Now, this is one cushion that I've already done because there's two sides to the cushion. If it had been a dart, I would have lined everything up, and then I would have sewn right along that line to the point. And then it would have enclosed all of that in there, creating something that would look kind of like this on the front. That's kind of a rough view, but they're actually pleats. So they are basically just sewn across the top, which provides a little bit more fullness because this cushion will have a big curve, so it gives some fullness. So this side I've already done. So I'm going to show you how I put those together and then sew them. So this is the back side of the fabric, and there's two corners to it. This is one of the corners, and then this is the other corner. So you can see the marks that I had made earlier on that. When I do the cushion, I want the folds to go towards the outside. So when I'm marking these, I'm going to take, looking at this side, I'm going to take this fold. I'm going to have my fold go to the outer side of the cushion, and then I'm basically just going to line those up. And then I'm going to pin it into place. So the lines are lined up right there. So again, these two, I put them together, fold it over so the fold goes to the outside, and pin them into place. And then I'll do the last one over here. So I'm looking on this side, put my fingers right there on each of the lines, match them together, and then pin it into place. So I'm going to go ahead and do that on the other side, and I will be back in just a second to show you how I sew that. The next thing I'm going to do is to sew the pleats in place. I just need to anchor them so when I attach the piping or the welting to it, I don't have to worry about these shifting also. Now on my presser foot, I do have some red marks, and so I'm actually going to use one of the red marks as a guide. The seam allowance is going to be 1/2 inch, and so that is going to be well within 1/2 inch. I'm going to go ahead and put my needle back in the center because I had it adjusted. So it is in the center. I'm going to start just to the back side of the pleats, and then I'm just going to sew right along the edge just to anchor the pleats. And then I'll just go off the side. I don't need to backstitch because all of this will be covered in the other seam allowance. I'm going to go ahead and do the other side, and then we'll get to sewing the welting on. Alrighty, the next step is we want to get our welting attached to one of the sides of the cover. Now this is welting, it's actually cording, so the inside of it, the cording I was able to salvage from the other pillow cushions, the cushion covers, and I just made my own covering for it, and so this is going to be the welting that I'm going to be using. Now you can see it already has kind of a form. It's a stiffer type of cording, so it has the curve form of the top cushion cover. This is one side of the cushion cover, and it does have the curves too because I have sewn the top edge of the pleats. When I'm attaching the welting, I'm going to do it so that the welting is going to be on the inside of the fabric. Now, it would be great if the edge of the welting went all the way to the edge of the fabric, but it doesn't. There's actually a box part on the bottom, so this will actually need to stop just a little bit, a few inches above it. To make sure I get it in the right place, I'm basically going to be looking at the curves, and these curves that are on here are going to go on the curves of the cushion. So when I put it on here, I'm going to have the raw edge of the welting against the raw edge of the cushion cover. And I might need to twist it a little bit, and then I'm going to clip it in place. Clips work better than pins for this, but you definitely could use pins if that's what you have. So I'm going to go ahead and pin just a few more on this side so that you can see, or clip a few more on this side so that you can see what it looks like. Okay, so what I'm noticing, because it shouldn't go all the way to the bottom, so I'm kind of wondering what's happened. I'm going to go ahead and kind of look over here on this side to kind of pin a few or clip a few. I have a suspicion that the cording moved on the inside, which is actually is going to be easy to fix. And as I kind of stretch it out and along that way, I can tell that that's what it's going to be. I'm going to go and just spread this out just a little bit more, my clips, because if I have to adjust it, then I don't have to remove all those clips. But as you can see, I'm basically putting the cording so that the cording is on the right side of the fabric, the raw edges are lined up. So I'm going to have to kind of fiddle and adjust this just a little bit to get it exactly where I need it to be. And then once I do that, I will be ready to sew. So if you're adding welting, right side of the fabric, raw edges match up, the welting is on the outside, I guess you would say. All right, next we'll be sewing it on.